it probably sounds obvious, but he'll probably have a lot time better. See, I'm so sleep deprived still as a parent that my words come out of order sometimes.
Yep.
You're listening to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we're going to be talking about the horrors of sleep training. It can be a different experience for everybody. For some folks, it is a nightmare. For some folks, like Kelly in the comments section of our current Facebook live stream, it is a breeze.
Ooh.
And so we're going to share our personal experiences, and then I'm going to dig into a couple of articles I found that offer some interesting tricks and some useful pieces of knowledge that even I didn't know going into this. So hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're a parent who's going through it, you can get some interesting stuff out of it. But before we dig into all of that, Brandon, if our listeners want to reach out to us, where can they find us?
Please do us a favor. Check us out on all your major social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. If you want to go old school, you can send us an email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, you can find all of our episodes on any place you get your podcasts.
That's right. So, Brandon, how have things been going with Noah this week?
We have been busy. So for the last week, the most recent week here, I was solo parenting. My wife was at a conference for the week, so Monday to Friday, pretty much, I was all by my lonesome, just hanging out with my son, doing the full routine. I was doing the nighttime stuff, the morning stuff, the feedings, the driving to daycare, back and forth. No splitting of tasks, just 100% of everything. So, per usual, anytime I get a glimpse into the single parenting lifestyle, I just realize, man, that's really difficult.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Full stop.
Oh
just
yeah,
like single parents, like just it's like a. I don't know if you can pick this up on the microphone.
It's
but
one or
there's
two
a slow
people
clap.
applauding.
There's a slow clap going on.
Yeah, which is probably how it feels, being a thankless job such as parenting can be. But that's what I'm going to be going through later this week. My wife is taking a work trip. And currently, my mom and her mom are watching little David for a few days, and I'm going to have him on my own for Thursday and Friday. So I'm going to get a little taste of that. We'll actually dig into that more next week and kind of compare our experiences. But, single parents who are listening to this, our thoughts and prayers go out to you because it's a tough job, and, we are big fans of you.
On a daily basis. Yeah, I just don't know how you get up. Mm-hmm. Then I get up. Because, yesterday was one of those just classic quintessential days as a parent where you're like, my God, I don't know how I'm going to make it through the day.
Yeah. Because
my son was just, I don't know what was going on. He just wasn't happy all day long.
Yeah.
It started at 6 a.m., didn't want to go back to sleep. I mean, he slept, so he's, fine. He can wake up at 6, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it's the weekend. I wish I wanted to sleep in just a little bit, maybe, but he didn't feel like it. So I was up with him early, and he was just up pretty much the whole day. I mean, he took a little nap here and there, but just cranky. Mm-hmm. And it's just, when you realize you're in for one of those days.
Yeah.
That's just like exactly how I felt throughout the entirety of the day. I was just like, oh my God, I'm just going to hate today. And sure enough, I did. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know. It's just, it's the part of parenting where you don't really know how to deal with it. There really isn't maybe any way to deal with it, and I'm just coming off one of those days. Thankfully, my son did sleep through the night last night, so nice. I think I was kind of joking around. I was like, oh, I guess he does love me because he realizes he was a bit of a pill, and so then he granted me some sleep to help get me through it. So I'm just bouncing back, trying to get back into some normalcy, hoping that him going back to daycare and kind of getting into his usual routine kind of snap things back because it was just a challenge all day yesterday.
Yeah. Jeez, I know what you mean. And once you get into those days, it's almost like there's no way to turn it around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It just drags on.
Yeah, and it can be exhausting. Like weekends for me are, I love it because I get to spend the whole day with the family. But the other side of it is exhausting because especially once your kid gets to the age where they have to, not where they have to, where they're able to walk around on their own. It's physically tiring to follow them around all day and make sure that they are not getting into anything dangerous or breaking any of your stuff. It's you need a good hard nap at the end of it, and sometimes in the middle of it. Like, when David goes to bed, like for his nap in the middle of the day on the weekends, I usually take a good little half-hour nap myself before I get into the chores.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. It's like in the middle of those days, like his nap time is the only time that you're able to actually get anything done in the house.
Yep.
So that's probably a good place to transition into what we're talking about this week with sleep training. It can start really, those first few months are the most crucial just in terms of you're getting the least amount of sleep right there, bringing the kid home from the hospital. And then you begin trying to get your kid on a consistent schedule. And there's all kinds of challenges along the way. For us, I know that David, it was funny. He started out perfectly fine in terms of sleep training. When we put him in his own crib, in his own room around 6 months, he did fine at first. It was like he didn't care at all.
Yeah.
And then after a few months, he started getting into what they call the regression, where all of a sudden he was starting to be more needy, and he was waking up in the middle of the night, and sometimes it would take over an hour to get him back to sleep.
Right.
Almost like it was in the first few weeks of having the baby in the house, where you're sleeping for half an hour at a time. It felt like that. And over the time, it's kind of ebbed and flowed with him, as I guess it does with all kids, where he will go months where he'll sleep straight through the night, no problem at all. And then he'll have months like this past month for us where he has regressed, I guess, again. And he will either have a really hard time falling asleep at first, where it may take him an hour where he's just crying every few minutes, or he'll be fine at night, and then around 1 or 2 a.m., he'll wake up again and start crying. And here's what he does every night on cue, and we don't know how he does this unless maybe the monitor also is a two-way monitor. He knows when we get in bed to go to sleep. He knows because he's quiet until my head hits the pillow, and then he starts crying every night without fail. It's a joke between me and my wife. We're like, how does he know? Every time, how does he know? He always starts crying as soon as the house gets quiet. And I wonder if maybe that has something to do with it, where he hears the noise going on downstairs. If the TV's on, the vacuum's running, the dishes are being done. And then as soon as it gets quiet, it's almost like somehow he knows, and that's when he gets upset. I don't know. I don't know if that's been your experience at all. I know that Noah's sleep cycle has been a very big challenge in and of itself.
Have you tried varying when you go to bed? I guess it doesn't matter. Just whenever you do go to bed, he notices.
We're not consistent. Like some nights we're up until midnight watching Netflix and doing dishes and cleaning the kitchen. And some nights we're so tired that we get in bed, before 10 o'clock. It doesn't matter.
Whenever it is, he's like, aha.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
my gosh, what a little detective.
It's like he's listening, with his ear to the wall, and then it gets quiet, and he's like, and he's like the Joker, right? In the Dark Knight. Here we go.
Yes, excellent. Oh, sorry, creepy images there of the Joker, the crib, and the anyway. Sorry.
Anyway,
yeah. Wow. Oh, that's interesting. I can't say I have any of that. It's interesting. Noah, he does pretty good. He's very into his routine. And just by the way, we have talked about sleep training a little bit earlier on. One of our previous episodes, we dug into like the routines quite a bit. I highly recommend because it's very useful. The easiest way to get the sleeping down is to do the day-to-day while they're awake routine to get that down. So Noah's really good with his routine, right? And we always end the day with, bath time, then he gets his bottle, and then he goes to bed, right? We'll see about the bottle as he's like a year now, and I don't know. We're struggling to make that transition.
Yeah.
But he's usually pretty good. Like even if he's like really fussy, he'll kind of go down, usually without too much of an issue because he's tired at the usual time.
Yeah.
After a long day. So we haven't really had too much of a problem with that. We've always kind of had a problem with him waking up in the middle of the night. That's always been our thing. And for a long time, we really couldn't do sleep training for a couple of months at a time because he had a lot of ear infections.
Yeah.
And so if you've listened to some of our previous episodes, there's a lot of pieces about the saga of my son and his ear infections, and he's finally gotten over it, knock on wood. So he's been doing great since then. But yeah, it's always just been like, once or twice a night, kind of consistently. When we've tried to do sleep training, when we actually thought it could be successful, like we didn't try it if we knew he wasn't feeling well, because you just can't really control the pain if a child has it, and that's kind of the part that sucks. Like if they're in pain, if they have a cold, if they've got an ear infection, if they've got, if they're sick, whatever it is, like you can't really do anything because they just can't control it, and like they want to sleep, surprisingly. But yeah, it was always like maybe 2 o'clock he'd wake up, and then maybe again at like 4 o'clock, and then maybe again at 6 o'clock, every couple of hours, kind of going along with the feeding thing. That's the hardest thing to overcome, is that he wants to wake up every couple of hours to eat some food, and you have to kind of break him of that habit. He did usually do pretty good when we tried the sleep training, I will say. So usually within 1, maybe 2 days of like really going hard at just kind of the, crying it out, monitored kind of crying it out, where you go in, but only after letting them kind of try to deal with it for a few minutes at a time. He would usually kind of take to that after like usually 1 epically awful night, or maybe 2 epically awful nights. But then something else would come up, and it's just been kind of this ongoing struggle for us where we don't really know how to do a better job of it. And we've just started trying to cope with it in different ways that probably don't make it any better. But, for example, if he can make it until like 4 o'clock, like we just kind of have that as our like unofficial cutoff, where we're like, okay, he did a good enough job. We will go get him and feed him, and then he'll go back to sleep for a little bit longer.
You have to change the goalposts really to kind of measure your success, or else you're never going to have a successful night.
I just don't know how to do it any better. And that's something that I've just probably a big learning of parenting in the first year, is just like, you just get to a point where you're like, I don't know. You just throw in your hands up and you're like, I just can't even anymore figure this out. I'm sure there's probably a better way to do it. But then you're just generally exhausted as a parent, and like, I don't know, maybe I should be doing more research about it. So I'm interested to learn more today, Jesse, about what we could be doing a better job of. But that's kind of been our struggle area. Like last night, I mentioned my son slept through the night, and that's like a treat still. He's just not doing it consistently. I just kind of give him the credit if he makes it until about 4 o'clock, because that means he's slept from like 7 to 4. It's pretty good. I mean, that's 8 hours. And then he'll sleep another like 2 usually if we feed him, but it's just like, I don't know how to do any better.
Well, I mean, he may just be one of those kids that doesn't sleep that much.
And it's a terrifying thought, but it's just like, well, it is what it is.
Well, not to extinguish the light at the end of the tunnel for you, but I came across an interesting article this week. Let me dig it up here. That says study shows parents don't catch up on sleep until 6 years after having a baby.
Oh, perfect.
So I read that headline, and my heart dropped a little bit. I was like, oh crap, here we go. But I mean, it's kind of something. You hear it, you're not totally surprised. And of course, I say this with any study that we talk about on this podcast. Like, nothing is gospel. Like, nothing is unchanging for years in the future. They say this now, they may come around 6 months to a year from now and say, no, that study was wrong. Really, mentally, you're getting the same amount of rest or sleep or whatever anyway, and then someone else is going to say, no, that's wrong, and you're never going to get enough sleep. So basically what they're saying is it takes that long to kind of get back onto a normal sleep cycle. And even then, they say that for dads, on average, you're sleeping 15 minutes less than normal, and moms are sleeping 20 minutes less than normal. And I don't know how they found that 5-minute distinction between them, but, it's probably true because...
we have to be wrong in some way as the dads, just because, like... we're doing X percent less.
And that 5 minutes is definitely enough to cause some resentment in the relationship.
I mean, if you want to put it in numbers, that's like
your 5 minutes.
That's like 25% less, right? It's 5 out of 20. It's a fifth. That's a fourth. There you go. Yeah. So we do 25% less.
Yeah. Exactly.
As the dads.
That sounds about right.
I will cop to that. I don't know about you. That sounds about right.
Yeah. But so I took a poll of parents on my personal Facebook page anyway, and I asked them, how long did it take you to get back a normal sleep schedule after your kid was born? And the general consensus was never.
Great.
Good. So, and these are coming from older parents, like who have had kids who have grown up and moved out of the house, and and that's something that you kind of say. But at the same time, it's like, I think over time, it's like I said earlier with Noah, and just kind of choosing what to measure as success. You change your goalposts. You may have to decide that from now on, 8 hours is not what you're going to get, but that you can function properly on 6 hours.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not totally healthy, but I think parenting in general is not totally beneficial to your health. So I think you just have to deal with it.
Yep.
But, that's just one of the adjustments that you have to make with parenting, is deciding that you're just going to get less sleep. But another kind of cool article that I came across had some interesting sort of common misconceptions about sleeping and sleep training with kids. And I learned some interesting stuff from it. So the first misconception that they list here is that an early bedtime must mean an early wake-up time. And what they're saying is, we think that when we go to bed later, we sleep in later the next morning. But the thing is, babies are not the same as that. What the point that they're trying to make there is that melatonin is sort of that sleepy hormone that sets in when it gets to be bedtime for your kid. And once you start to establish a sleep schedule with your kid, that melatonin starts to set in at the same time every night. But what they're saying is, if you don't put your baby down for bed when that melatonin starts to set in, that melatonin goes away, and in its place, adrenaline starts to produce. And that's why your kids get their second wind if they're up past 8:30 or something like that. It just goes in the opposite direction, and sometimes they get irritable, and it's the same deal if they don't get a nap in the middle of the day. I'm guilty of this. Me and my wife have said before, like, if he doesn't go down for his nap in the middle of the day, if he just refuses to nap, we're like, oh, well, he'll just be more tired, by the end of the night. That never turns out to be true. He always just ends up being grumpy or something, and it takes him an extra half hour to fall asleep. And it's because of that. It's because apparently the melatonin and adrenaline cycles kind of get topsy-turvy or something like that. So that was Aeon.
Well, who knew there was actual science behind any of this stuff that's going on?
I know. It feels like just one big sort of random cyclone of events, right? There seems to be sort of no order to this sometimes, but there is some science behind it.
Science strikes again.
Right? So they listed one that I actually kind of disagree with. And I'm going to post this article in the show notes, 7 things you thought wrong about babies' sleep and how to fix your situation. But the third one they list is that it's a common misconception that you should crutch on projectors or mobiles if your baby is having a hard time getting to sleep or staying asleep. And they're saying that the reality is that may not actually help at all, because if they produce blue light, that suppresses the creation of melatonin. I have found in my personal experience, at least with David, that that's not true. David has this blue hippo that's made by VTech. It's called a Lil Critter Soother, something like that. I'll post a link to that as well, because it's been a godsend for him. He cannot sleep without it, but it produces sort of a constellation of stars that's projected out of it onto the ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
And it cycles from blue light to green light, red, yellow, that kind of thing. But it's mostly blue, and yet he can't sleep without it. And when I put it in there with him, he falls asleep pretty quickly, actually. So I don't know that these are going to be true for everyone. And I'm sure there is some science behind it, and I've bought into that. Like, I turn off the blue light on my phone, and I try not to use my phone so much before bed, because everyone tells you that blue light keeps you awake.
Right.
And maybe that's true to an extent, but at least in my experience, that hasn't been true.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we haven't used any kind of projecting light, any kind of a thing. He has a mobile, but it's just like a little stuffed toy kind of a thing over his bed. And I mean, he doesn't even really interact with it or even like utilize it or look at it or anything. Like, Noah's either like asleep or awake. Like, that's kind of it. Like, we put him down, he's fine. He doesn't really use anything to help him kind of get to sleep or drowse off or anything. And it's funny because you guys actually gave us one of those hippos for Noah's birthday. Thank you for the gift, by the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we haven't really yet figured out how to introduce it into his sleeping, just because he, like I mentioned, like he kind of does fine. If he's usually pretty logical. Not that I like to admit this, because I want him to sleep always every night for as many hours as possible.
Yeah.
But usually if he wakes up, there's a reason, right? Like, he's either hungry or he's pooped or something.
Yeah.
And so we tried, admittedly, maybe only one time, maybe twice. I can't remember how many times we tried. But we tried to, like, put him down, and then we, like, put the hippo in. And it's just, like, anytime you do anything out of the norm, he just, like, latches onto it immediately. And he just, like, sprang up, and he was like, oh, my God, what is this? I've got to go investigate. And he just, like, spent time just, like, knocking it around. Like, literally, he would just, like, go over to it, and he was just like, smack, smack. And he was just kind of like, we tried to turn the sound on, we tried to do whatever, like, I don't know. And it kind of goes back to, I don't know if his hearing is, like, all the way back yet.
Sure.
From having the ear infections. That's just something that you learn, is it really can impair their hearing. So maybe he doesn't really get the music. And we talked about this in one of our other episodes about babies and listening to music, is I just don't know if my son can quite pick up on music right now. It's only been a couple weeks since he's gotten over his latest ear infection, so we haven't really figured out the hippo yet. We just kind of are, bare bones when it comes to the sleeping approach. Like, we put him in the crib, and that's kind of it.
Well, so what David does with his hippo is he actually does play with it as he falls asleep.
Yeah.
So, there is that period of a few minutes where sometimes he's lifting it into the air, or, hitting it or turning it over or flipping it around, and he'll talk to it too.
Okay.
So, he gets a little bit more active with it before he falls asleep, but eventually he does. And, it's different for Noah because of his eating schedule right now. But you may find that, with David, sometimes he will wake up with a poopy diaper when he actually gets up. But if he uses the bathroom in the middle of the night, and it also depends on what kind of diaper they have, and he sleeps with that for an extra 7 hours. It's not going to blow out, and it's not really going to give him that much of a rash. So, I don't know what the solution is, and there may be no solution. But once Noah kind of adjusts to something like that, it may help kind of avoid that waking up at 4 a.m. Here I am trying to give you advice.
Yes, appreciated.
Yeah, when my son still, sometimes takes an hour to fall asleep at night with his toy. So, it's not a cure-all. It's not going to help everybody. But
well, no, I am curious because this is the thing that we're going through, and maybe you're right that we're not quite at the right time for it yet, because I'm dreading the transition to solid foods, because my son is, he's just past a year, and so now he needs to be weaning off breast milk, weaning off bottles, doing solids, no purees, nothing, and we're just really struggling with that in general. But one of my biggest fears is, like, we give him a lot of feeds around nighttime.
Yeah.
Especially, and that's a part of his routine that gets him to bed. Like, every night, I mentioned his routine is he takes the bath, he gets a bottle, he goes to bed. What am I going to do if I don't do the bottle anymore? How am I going to get him to sleep? And I don't know what the answer is, and I'm quite terrified of the answer.
I think that was, I don't remember, and my wife right now was on an airplane headed to Las Vegas instead of watching this Facebook Live, or else I'd ask her.
How dare she? Yeah.
I know. But I seem to remember that the nighttime feeding it disappeared around the time, that right before we finished weaning him.
Yeah.
I know that at the very end of weaning him off breast milk, it was like just at morning, at lunch, at night. Like, we didn't have, so many a day.
Yeah.
I know that bedtime one was one of the last ones to go.
Yeah.
But definitely the middle of the night one stopped. And then he wasn't hungry until his first one of the morning, which was, I guess, around 7 or 8. It feels like it's been so long now that I don't totally remember. But yeah, that's the linchpin. And it feels like probably once you get him fully weaned, it probably sounds obvious, but he'll probably have a lot time better. See, I'm so sleep deprived still as a parent that my words come out of order sometimes.
Yep.
But you'll have a better time sleeping, I'm hoping.
That's what I'm figuring out. Is like, the reason why the sleep continues to be a struggle is because you continue to evolve what you have to deal with, and that's just not fair. A lot of parenting is just not fair, and I just don't know who made up these rules, but it's just not fair. But yeah, like, even if you get it down to like a decent-ish level, then you take away the bottles, and they've got to struggle and be hungry. And my doctor, I like my doctor, but like, a lot of the times the things she's telling me is just stuff you just do not want to hear.
Yeah.
As a parent, most of the time that's the case. Like, you need to switch to solid foods. Like, you don't want to hear that.
But I think that's a doctor's job to tell you the things that you don't want to hear.
But the one in particular that's happening of late is with that transition. She's like, well, in your training of getting them to eat solid foods, they may not want to do it, right? They may not like it, and you just kind of have to let them not eat, and then until they get hungry, and then they will kind of be forced to eat. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, Doc. Like, let me just starve my child,
right?
And then. But in the back of my mind, after I've made that first joke, I'm just thinking like, oh my God, does she really think that I'm going to put my kid to bed without having given him some food of some kind? Because he is not going to sleep, and then I'm going to be paying for it in the middle of the night. Like, who thinks this is okay, Doc? That like I can starve my child, and then he's going to wake up in the middle of the night, and then what am I supposed to do about that? That's my problem. All over again, so I'm paying for it on the front end because he's pissed at me for not giving him any food that he likes, and then he's gonna wake me up in the middle of the night, and I can't feed him a bottle. What do I do?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know what to tell you.
This is a great podcast.
Yeah, right. This is basically every episode in a nutshell for us. It's like we start off with a problem that seems like there'd be a solution to it, and then over the course of half an hour, we just say "I don't know" to each other several times.
Perfect.
But that's all parenting is.
Let's go back to the science.
Right.
What does it tell me?
Well, one thing I want to switch to is because I don't have a solution here, but I'm going to talk about getting them to sleep in the first place, because you and I have both tried the same method with some success, and it's never 100%. But the Ferber method, what everyone calls the cry it out method, is still one of the most recommended methods by doctors, as far as I can tell. And is that something that you guys still do with Noah?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really had to do it of late, but when we have tried sleep training, that's basically what we've done.
Yeah, and it's so with him, and this is how we do it with David, where you do it like in increments where, they start crying, you go in after a couple minutes, and then the next time you wait a couple minutes more. And the thing that I struggled with at first, but now I'm really good at, is not picking them up when you go in there. Because apparently all you're supposed to do is go in there, maybe rub their back, reassure them that you're there, without getting them out of the position that they're in. And the hard part about that is once your kid is able to stand up in their crib, they stand up and they reach for you. And if you don't pick them up, they just scream and cry more. And then you have to go out and shut the door. It's really difficult, especially at first when you're so used to the kid, being in the same room as you and being in the bassinet and all that. It feels like you're being cruel to your kid. But, I just want to point out that, like, it does work eventually, at least for our kids. It does eventually get them asleep. And what it has led to for us is to where David, once he falls asleep, he generally stays asleep. And if he wakes up in the middle of the night, it's like he doesn't count on us going in there to get him anymore.
Okay.
So David may wake up at 1 a.m. and cry for a minute. And we wake up because we hear him on the monitor, but I don't go in unless he's screaming bloody murder. Or if it's extended, if it lasts more than a minute or two. Because usually it's one cry, and then I guess he realizes, oh, wait, no, I have to keep sleeping. They're not going to come in. I might as well just fall back asleep. And then also the benefit is, we have that hippo that we were talking about, the VTech thing. It detects noise, so it starts playing again. And he gets that soothing or a distraction at least, and it kind of occupies him for a few minutes until he falls back asleep. The downside to that thing is that it eats batteries. Like every couple of weeks the batteries die, and when they die, the lullabies start skipping. So it'll be like rock-a-bye, rock-a-bye, and that freaks him out.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, so I've turned on my monitor before to see him sitting straight up in bed, like at a distance, staring at this thing like it's possessed by a demon or something.
That seems creepy.
Yeah, not knowing what to do, and then eventually it just peters out and dies out completely, and then he starts crying again.
Gosh.
So part of me worries that he's getting a little dependent on it. Like it's gotten to the point where we have two, like one that we keep and then the one that we keep at his grandma's house for times like now where he's sleeping over. Because I'm afraid to put him to bed without it at this point.
Right. Well, you need some kind of a something. I don't know. Maybe we're just supposed to be better than this, Jesse. I just refuse to believe it because there's too many moments where I say that to myself. And I'm like, I can't possibly be doing all of these things so horribly wrong. Maybe I am, guys. Let me know. I guess we should quit the podcast or maybe just parenting if we're doing it so badly. But it's like, you mentioned the moving up the goalposts, like you recreate what success is. Like, I mean, you've kind of got it solved. Like, I mean, you're using some kind of a crutch, but I mean, I don't know. Like, what's the alternative? Are you really gonna like sleep train your kid out of waking up ever? I guess some parents do. We heard from Kelly. Like, good for you, Kelly. By the way. Really good job.
Yeah, Kelly has
rock star parenting.
Right.
You should be doing this show.
Right. By the way, if you guys don't follow us on Facebook, look us up, Dadsplaining a Fatherhood Podcast, because we do these live on Facebook most weeks, almost every week. And we got a really good comment section. So Kelly has left us several comments, and I want to go through a few of them just for a mom's perspective. Because she said that she's had a lot of success with it, but that it hasn't been perfect. She said that the more I hear about your struggles of parental amnesia is lifting.
Yes.
Which happens with us. Like,
let's bring ourselves back to the horrors.
Exactly.
That's what the show is about.
I think we put that sort of mask over the past. It's like, yeah, it was really great because nostalgia, right? And then the more you talk about it, the more you're like, oh, wait, no, it was horrible. I forgot.
God, I was awake at 3 a.m. and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, so she says all 3 kids had lots of congestion in their early months from 1 to 5. So we would let them fall asleep elevated in their swing and then transfer them to their crib. If they wouldn't fall asleep in the crib, we'll move them back to the swing and try again. Many nights they were sleeping elevated. After their congestion cleared, we'd have to spend 1 to 2 nights to relearn to sleep flat again.
Yeah.
So, and she's used pacifiers for the younger 2 kids, and that's helped them soothe them during the night. And by the way, David also sleeps with his pacifier every night still. We're trying at this point to start to wean him off of it, which we've gotten to the point where most of the time he doesn't have it when he's home with us just running around playing. He has one at daycare, and then he sleeps with it at night too. But we're trying to get him off of that. But so that he uses that to sleep, and she used that to sleep to help the kids sleep as well. It's helped them self-soothe by having 3 to 4 pacifiers sprinkled around them in the crib for them to grab / throw angrily during the night.
I've tried that before and it's never worked.
Really?
For Noah, because he likes to turn around a lot and roll over, so he'll just knock them out of the crib all together. And that's the biggest thing that'll happen with his pacifier that he starts out with is if he drops it, he'll just like inadvertently kick it out of the crib and then he can't find it again.
So he does it by accident.
Yeah, exactly. But if I've tried the sprinkling thing and then he'll just like roll over on top of it.
Yeah.
Or he'll just kick it out of there. So like 1 is the best I can do with him.
Yeah. And David does it on purpose. If he gets mad at us, he'll pick up his pacifier, which we use the Wubbanub, which if you guys haven't seen this, it's a pacifier with a small stuffed animal attached to it, which is kind of nice for them because it's easier for them to keep track of. They're harder to lose. The downside is they're harder to clean. But anyway, he'll take that if he's mad, and he'll throw it out. And then he'll stand up and look over the edge of the crib and say, uh-oh, over and over again until we go in to pick it up and give it back to him. We've given him 2 to sleep with at night sometimes. And sometimes that works, but sometimes he'll just have one in his mouth and then play with the other one, and that keeps him awake.
Great.
So, every solution isn't going to work for everybody.
That's what I'm talking about. There's too many things, guys. There's just too many things. Like,
it's too much.
I'm just listening to it, Jesse, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, you sound like you're doing fine to me, but there's like 5 different things that we all admit that we could be like have weaned them off, or there's this crutch and that crutch and that crutch. And like, it just doesn't seem possible to achieve perfection.
But here's the thing. Are they going to grow up to be serial killers? Probably not.
Definitely not.
Right? So are we really doing that bad of a job? Like, if they don't sleep perfectly through the night, are they going to be that negatively affected by it as they grow older? Probably not.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the sleep I can't get back. And that's really what it is. We just have to get over ourselves, apparently.
Yeah,
because that's what it is. You're right. I try to tell myself that, but then when you're up like 2 or 3 times a week in the middle of the night, you're just like, why is my life this?
I know. But so from what I understand, though, that will go away. Like having your sleep cycle interrupted so drastically, I think that will go away. You just have to get used to your kid eventually stays up later and later, and then they get to the point where they're in pre-K in school, and you got to get them up for school. But at least you're getting that 5 to 6 hours uninterrupted,
Yeah.
So I'd say there is a light at the end of the tunnel for you and Austin in that regard.
Excellent. We extinguished it earlier in the episode, but it's back on again.
Exactly.
That's what
yeah.
I'm getting.
Yeah. So I mean, probably once you guys get through the weaning and getting the eating adjusted, I'm sure that he'll start sleeping through the night. Not every night. David doesn't do it every night, but
I mean, it's killing me. But that's what this life is. It's like stress and anxiety and like fear and. I know. Right?
I know.
I just don't know. The only advice I guess I could give on the sleep training at this point, and we've talked about the cried out method. We talked about it a good bit on a previous episode in detail, but just keep in mind if there's only one of you, there's no option for you. Again, apologies, single parents, you don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are working as a pair, one of you is probably going to need to be the hard A, if you will, because it just in my situation, I'm not calling anybody out, but one of us in our relationship as parents is the one that tends to have to do the crying it out because it's tough.
Yeah.
And you really have to just like go into a stonewall mentality for it to succeed because it can succeed. We've talked about the fact that it did succeed. And that's the only thing that allows me to keep doing it is I know that it has worked. And so if I have to do it again, like it can work. Yeah. But it's just a real B. Like it really sucks to do it. So if you're the parent that can sustain through that, like be the one that does it because it's really hard. If you're the one that's not good at it, like just let the other person take over and just try to stay out of the way, basically.
But it bounces back and forth. Who is the good cop and the bad cop in the relationship?
Right, like you're good at different things. Yeah. Right.
Well, and I've noticed that like at first I was horrible at letting David cry it out. Yeah. And I didn't even realize how bad I was until my wife pointed it out to me that you're going in there every couple of minutes and you're picking him up and you're trying to rock him back to sleep and you're staying in there until he falls asleep. And that's not letting him fall asleep and not letting him learn to fall asleep. You got to let go. And that was really hard for me. And I didn't even realize that I was being so stubborn in that regard.
Yeah, you're a clinger. There you go. You're a stage 4 clinger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then it flipped. Like then I was the one doing, we got to let him cry it out. And I was being sort of like really stone cold about it. Yeah. And I was to the point where my wife was like, yeah, but you can't let him go half an hour crying. Like you got to go in there at some point and, keep him from getting hysterical. So, I think it ebbs and flows, and sometimes you're going to be the good cop. Sometimes you're going to be the bad cop. But it's going to be okay. Before we go, because I do want to end this on kind of a positive, uplifting note.
That'd be great, yeah.
At least for your sake, Brandon.
Something, yeah.
I found one more article that gave some kind of cool tips. Here are some gadgets, some fun things that may help your kids sleep through the night that are at least worth a try.
I'm interested.
Number one, wearable blankets. They may be called sleep sacks, depending on the brand. They're sort of an evolved version of the swaddle. You're not wrapping your kid in a blanket, but it's a blanket that either zips up or snaps over the shoulders where you can let the arms hang loose, you can unzip it and let the legs breathe. But basically it's a blanket that doesn't come off of them in the middle of the night. We don't do this as much right now because it's getting to be warmer here in Atlanta. Yeah. But in the wintertime especially, these things are great. And it kind of restricts mobility a little bit to where they're probably not going to roll around and stand up and walk around in their cribs so much, but that they can pull themselves up if they need to. They can flip over, so it doesn't necessarily strap them to the mattress. But they recommended the Halo Sleep Sack Swaddle, which is the same brand that Ashley and I used for David. And you guys have a sleep sack as well, right?
We have a sleep sack, yeah. We've still been rocking that. I mean, that's another thing where it's like, I don't know, I guess eventually he needs to not use the sleep sack anymore. There's all these rules, man. That's the problem. Why are there all these rules? It's like, oh, well, he can't do that for forever. I'm like, well, what's going to happen? Is he going to be 25 and using a sleep sack? Probably not.
Probably not.
But he likes the sleep sack still. Yeah. So do I really need to give it up? Yeah, Noah sleep sack every night.
Yeah, let him use it if it works for him. Yeah. Then they recommend a brand that I'm not familiar with that some of our listeners might have heard of, Hannah Anderson pajamas. Apparently they're more expensive. They're kind of high-end pajamas. They're not like the cheap kind you're going to get at Old Navy, which I mean that's like all we have.
It's like the difference between Target and Target.
Yeah, I see. But they say basically these high-quality 100% cotton pajamas, they hold up 3 times as well as your store brand, basically. So they last longer. But to me, my thing is, at least in the first couple of years, your kid grows so fast that you're not
Yeah.
going to need pajamas lasting more than 6 months.
Yeah.
Like David can barely fit into his 12 to 18 month pajamas right now, and he's 17 months old.
Right.
So I mean, that probably works better as your kid gets older and they don't grow quite as fast.
Yeah, I haven't really noticed that his clothing matters for my son. Like we did the full footy like onesie pajamas all throughout winter because it was cold and he needed to be covered head to toe basically.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be colder at night. But now that it's warmed up, we've switched back to little onesies, and I mean he's fine. Like I haven't had any issue where I felt like his clothing has been a thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place. They also recommend, in terms of lighting in the room, flameless candles. So those artificial candles that have like the kind of the flicker.
Yeah,
it's
the
not a
flickering
hologram, but
kind of
it's like a thing
yeah.
that looks like a real candle. That I guess the thought behind that is it gives them something to focus on, and it kind of, because they said basically my 4-year-old would always sneak out of a room to come to us and say, "Oh, I have something important," or "I'm scared of the dark," that kind of thing. So they use these LED candles, and that kind of, I guess, distracts the kid and gives them a little light in the room so that they're not totally afraid of the dark. They said the downside is if these are wax candles, be careful because kids will bite into them.
That's weird. So maybe that's something more for like a slightly older.
Yeah, I think so. And
it just seems like a big distraction.
Exactly. But I wanted to bring it up because we do have listeners that have toddlers and older kids for sure. And I feel like you're always going to need these tips even as the kid gets older. They also recommend constellation projection night lights, kind of like the VTech hippo that we've been talking about.
Yeah, take that, science.
Right?
Yeah.
and they say the same thing, the experience that we had. If we forget to turn it on or if the batteries died, the kid would refuse to settle down without it. So, kids get attached to these things, but I don't think that's going to last forever.
Yep.
They bring up a really cool alarm clock. It's called OK to Wake, where it'll be a faint red light until it's time to wake up, and then it turns green, which is great for kids before they learn to read clocks. I can't get out of bed yet because the thing is still red.
Yeah, I've heard about that because, again, when your kid gets a little bit older, once they wake up, they're going to want to run in and, jump on the bed or whatever. But as parents, you set up this relationship where it's like, I will flag for you literally via this light.
Yeah.
It's okay to get up and come play with me. And so you get like the Bluetooth lamp. We have one in our kids' room actually already, but we don't use it for that purpose yet. We just use it as like a night light. Yeah. And it has different cycles and colors and sounds and things like that. So they're pretty cool, and they can be used in different ways. So you can get one of those things and just use it as a night light when you go in there in the middle of the night. And then eventually upgrade to its intended purpose.
I see. And what I would recommend is a little evil plan here. Kind of treat it like an elf on the shelf where you say, it turns green when you can go, but if you get out of bed before it turns green, it can see you and it will tell us. And kind of, give them that like, oh, Santa's always watching me kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's psychologically bad for your kid,
Creepy,
but I say
maybe.
If it works,
effective,
it works.
Absolutely.
They also bring up Baby Bjorn potty chairs for when your kid gets to the potty training phase where they can go to the bathroom on their own. This provides one less obstacle, that way they don't have to walk down the dark, scary hallway, or they don't try and drag their siblings out of bed to walk with them so they're less afraid. Put a little training potty in the bedroom with them that's easy to clean up. That way, all they have to do is walk over to that thing, do their business, and walk back to bed. And I think that might actually prevent incidents, because I've heard so many parents say this, where they find out that eventually their kid has just been waking up and peeing on the carpet and then going back to bed.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
I've heard that multiple times.
Wow.
And I don't know why it is, and it's always boys that do this.
Of course.
Just because the nature of the way they do their business.
Yeah.
But maybe if that's there, that means that bathroom toilet is not so far away, so they're less likely to make those accidents. So that's an interesting one that I'm going to keep in mind. They also recommend kind of turning the bed into a hideaway, kind of creating those kind of cool tents.
Yeah.
That you see in movies where rich parents are able to do that. So they offer the Crate and Kids Playhouse Canopy, which is $160. And,
that's it? Okay.
So if you're willing to drop a little change, kind of turn it into something fun. I never had that as a kid. But I think it's kind of
called a
interesting.
couple boxes and a quilt draped over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they recommend toddler pillows, certain bedtime stories. Owl Moon, A House is a House for Me. The Moon is Going to Addie's House. The I'm Not Scared book. I've heard of that one. And Dr. Seuss's Sleep book. I think the one that I always used to read was Goodnight Moon, I think. And Corduroy, like I would love the Corduroy books as a kid. So reading a bedtime story to your kid, I think, helps once they get older. I used to actually tell David stories. I would just make up stuff like stupid little, this is the adventure of young Scottstopher and his journey to retrieve the magic crystals. And it was more just fun for me because, he doesn't understand what the heck I'm saying.
I hope that's a real story you told him. If not, you should totally do it.
It was a real story. Yeah.
Scottstopher.
He had multiple traveling partners and they went from village to village and there were like evil monsters and stuff like that. It was kind
of. Are there any
other
other kind of monsters? I don't know.
there are no good monsters.
Well,
but anyway, bedtime stories are obvious. It's an obvious one, but worth a try if your kid isn't getting to sleep. So there's lots of little things, and I guess basically the tip I would give to any parents going through this is just throw these at your kid and see what sticks.
Not the books.
Yeah, don't throw the books.
Not the books, guys.
Although that will probably get them to fall asleep.
Ow.
Just not in the way that you want to.
Okay, we're editing that out.
I'm going to cut that out.
We didn't say that.
Child Protective Services, if you're listening, that was a joke.
Jesse doesn't do cheesing, he does booking. Just throws a book at him.
You throw the book at him, literally. No, that's a joke. I love my kid. I would never do that to him. All right, I think that's probably a good place to end today's episode of Dadsplaining. Again, in a nutshell, just try different things, see what works. There's tips out there, there's strategies, there's science, and then there's counter science to go against it. And don't not do something that works for your kid just because some article says that it's going to be bad for your kid. Look, if it works, it works. And you're not going to kill your kid by putting on a blue light in their room.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, we'll close it there. If you have some thoughts on this or questions or personal experiences you want to share, send them to us. We would love to hear it. Brandon, how can our listeners get in touch with us?
You can comment, follow, like all of our stuff on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. You can send us your thoughts in an email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can find all of our episodes anywhere you get your podcasts.
Fantastic. So, Brandon, what are we talking about next week?
So we kind of teased this at the beginning of today's episode, but we're going to talk about solo parenting when you're not normally a solo parent. So previously, just the other week, my wife was away at a work convention for a week, and so I was taking care of my son. And Jesse's about to go through the same situation on his end this week. So we're going to compare notes, talk about the scarring experiences, beg our wives to never leave us, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned.
Oh, yeah. So until next time, I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And this week's dad joke comes courtesy of the Netflix show The OA, which second season is streaming now. And they didn't pay me to plug this or anything. I just freaking love this
would
show.
Love to be a sponsor.
Yeah, right? Okay, so here's the joke. Brandon, what did the sexy brown chicken say to the sexy brown cow? Brown chicken, brown cow.
Excellent.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.